district leaders, we definitely do as district leaders, we lead with openness to our district, to our members, and to the board, because there is that requirement as a nonprofit that we lead with some level of transparency. Now, that word vulnerability, I found this kind of humorous. Brene Brown, she not even arguably has established vulnerability as a way to lead by her popularity, by the downloads from her YouTube, from her TEDx talk that she had. But I found this quote on Brene Brown. The definition of vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? That just sounds absolutely horrible. And I was surprised to find that quote. And I throw that in there because what I have learned and what I'm still learning is vulnerability is just that step above transparency that becomes a superpower when you're leading. So I threw that in there kind of as a nod to her, because I struggle with that. And in being vulnerable to everybody in this room, that is a word that if you look at the circles that I run with in LinkedIn, I even did a LinkedIn live about vulnerability and culture, the culture of vulnerability, because it's a friend, my friend Adam Hoots, he doesn't like the word culture for his reasons. I don't like the word vulnerability. I just have struggled with that. But as I have slowly been along the edges of that, I've learned that there is power in that vulnerability, and it's not easy for some of us. Some of us, it's very, very difficult. And that is something that I've struggled with. Is it because I'm my age? Is it how I was raised? Certainly, there's some of that. Some of it has to do with the generation that I grew up with. There's a whole bunch of other things that make me a knucklehead. That is how I was raised. But what I'm learning is the power within that vulnerability. So when I say this, what's the difference? Transparency, we can all lead in that levels of transparency. I found that I could accept that. But if I step a little bit more into the vulnerability side, that becomes a superpower for your leadership skills. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through what we do in District 26 and what I do with a group of superintendents that meet, many of them on the East Coast and in the Dallas in the Texas region. And we go through this exercise of leadership via transparency. And what I hope you walk away with from this is there is a process that comes with practice. It's just like your 5 to 7 minute speeches that you're given in Toastmasters. It's just like table topics. It's just like learning to be the Toastmaster for the first time. And many of you might even be leaders for the first time this year in your clubs as a club officer. You may be new at it. It just takes practice. So what we're going to do is there's an exercise, and this is where Robert kind of alluded to, is we're going to have an opportunity. So be thinking about this. I need somebody with a problem. And what I've been guaranteed is there isn't anybody in District 103 that has any problems. So we may have to go outside of the district and find somebody who has some problems. But the idea is you're going to have a problem owner, and that problem owner has to work with, they have to have a genuine problem. So it's not role play. And that's one of the most important parts about this whole thing is you're not role playing for somebody else. You're going to have a genuine problem. And it could be anything. It could be communication, conflict of interest. It could even be trust. I mean, there's plenty of reasons why you might have a problem of some kind, but you have to be prepared to be transparent. What I have found in this exercise is the problem owner, as we ask these questions, they often don't even they come to the solution themselves as they talk about them out loud, but also as they verbalize them. And I'll get to why that's powerful in a later part of this session. The next person is going to be the coach. So let me back up a little bit. We've got a problem owner, we've got a coach, and we've got an observer. So I told you about the problem owner, what that entails. We all have problems. We've sort of didn't admit it. I didn't give you time to interact in that. We all have to admit that. The coach, that becomes your role as a leader. It becomes your role as a district leader. It becomes your role as a club leader, is to coach our people. Why are our clubs struggling? Why is membership low? Why do some people not like to participate in the program itself? So we all come to that level of coaching. How do we coach effectively as a leader? And we're going to do that through well-designed questions. These take practice. The big part about this is to not ask, or is to ask open-ended questions, not to ask close-ended questions, yes and no type questions. You don't want to do that. And when you have a couple in your mind, you can prepare some of them. And I'm going to give you a couple of them here. But what I have found, because I really struggled with this whole exercise, that's why I love doing this, is that we tend to lean into the yes or no questions. And when you can phrase a question, the exact same question differently, you're going to have an opportunity for that person to have to provide a response that's longer than yes or no. So it is an absolute practice. Some of you might already be brilliant at this. Some of us, I know for myself, I recently went through practice with this with the superintendents that I meet with, and I failed miserably, in my opinion. But I learned. Did I fail? No, I learned a lot. But I wasn't as successful as I had been in asking questions before because it's a practice. One of the things I think we do as leaders is we lead the witness a lot. So we'll ask those kind of questions. We think we're asking a question to them by saying, "Hey, don't you think there's a better way of doing this?" When we're really leading them to say, "Hey, there's a better way of doing this." So it's really about becoming emotionally intelligent in how we ask our questions. Some of them I threw up there. How would you have done this differently if somebody's sharing their problem? That really almost becomes a power question, is how would you have done it differently? Then you're asking them to respond to that. What outcomes were you expecting? Sometimes it's an expectation of a different outcome that they weren't even sure about. Like I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. Have you learned from any past interactions? One of the things that I like to use a lot is it seems like or it feels like, because one of the best things you can do as a human being is really be interested in somebody else, be interested in what they have to say. And by doing so, you repeat it back to them. You're sharing with them, hey, it seems like this. And in doing that, you're connecting with that individual as well too, because it's important for them to know that they're being heard. And also communication is, as we know, it can be a challenge with some people, with everyone. If we can mirror it back to them and get confirmation, then we know that we heard it right, because we often hear things with our own biases. And then the other question I like is, what's an action you can take right now? You want to leave it at a point where, what do you plan on doing about it right now instead of pushing it off? And then I put there in red on the bottom of that slide is, can you tell me more about? That right there is the lead in to understanding deeper the problems. Now, the whole thing with the coach when we're having this role is no solutionizing. And that is something we do a lot. And maybe you've never heard that word before because I think it's made up. I don't think it's a real word. But what we don't want to do is come in with solutions for people without clearly even understanding what is going on with their problem. And I've found this just even not just at a leadership level, but at a human level, human interaction with people that I'm not leading. When you truly don't go into solutionize, when you truly go in and ask questions and care deeply, and you are truly curious and not solutionize, people will find the solutions sometimes to their own problems. So the whole portion of being the coach is to be able to ask these well-designed questions. I've given you a couple of them, and that's just a practice that we go through when somebody shares their problem. Now, here's the magic part of this whole trio, we will call it, of development, and that's the observer. This observer is only watching the coach. They're really not even and shouldn't be paying too much attention to the person that's doing the speaking. You're here to observe the coach. You're looking for fouls. And so you're going to evaluate. This is an evaluation. This is the evaluation portion of this program. And that's where you're going to take some notes and you're going to say, you know what? You asked a yes question here or a no question. You didn't give opportunity. You're leading the witness. I've had to share that with some leaders already. In when I was an observer, is they were definitely leading the witness in there to get to the point that they wanted to make. And the other thing is you can be listening in for missed opportunities. And then there's a point after this exercise that we're going to go through where you provide that feedback to the coach, or yeah, to the coach, so they can improve their game. So the observer is just as important a role as the coach role. And then in the coach role, you're learning to ask well-designed questions. And then in the solver, you're actually sharing a real problem that you're having to process and think through as somebody asks you questions. And it becomes this circle of power, I'm going to call it. Because with this happens, I don't want to make it seem weird, but magic magic happens. Things change, people change, and I have seen it, especially on the problem side, where you see the old head tilt. If you're looking for visual cues, where you know that something happened where they really thought of something that they didn't see before. And I've seen it with the coaches as I've seen people go through this cycle. It does take practice where, the first time they're struggling, they're having a hard time coming up with questions. And then you see that growth. And then really on the observer side, this is what comes down to why I think evaluations are harder than given speeches. Because to truly give somebody a good evaluation of their speech, it takes a little bit of vulnerability of yourself. How honest am I going to be? But also you train your ear for the things that you want to help them on their speech. One of the things we probably have all heard it. I didn't hear anything wrong. Your speech was great. That's some of the worst feedback we can get because it doesn't help us grow. If we're truly listening, then we're able to understand and help somebody in their speech by truly being a good evaluator. It's an absolute skill as well too. So being the observer and not doing this just in this exercise, you really learn to hear it in other people because I can hear it when I'm with other people and I'm hearing them ask yes or no questions. That pops out for me. They're leading the witness. When you start seeing it, then you can start applying it to your life. So this whole leadership via transparency, it is an exercise. And this is where Robert kind of prepped everybody is I do need a problem owner. I do need a coach and I do need an observer. I will be the facilitator for this event. But the whole thing is to go through this process for you to visually watch it and know that this is a process that you can apply these principles outside of this. Or like me, you might be interested in doing this with other people to continue to develop your skills in asking questions. So, Robert, I actually have a very limited view of the audience, but I would ask right now, do we have anyone in District 103 or outside of 103 that has a problem that they would like to share? A situation, a conflict, something that you would like to share about?
Debbie Young, I see Debbie raising her hand. Debbie, you'd like to be the problem owner?
Sure,
Debbie,
why
if
not?
you could raise your virtual hand, that'll put you up in the corner of the screen if you wouldn't mind doing that. Fantastic. Thanks, Debbie. What club are you a member of?
I am actually in District 8 and it's South County Toastmasters and it is Club 1957.
1957. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, let's go ahead and raise your virtual hand. We'll put you in the upper corner of the screen. And then next, we need a coach. Who here wants to work on their listening skills and they're asking well-designed questions?
Okay. Debbie, are you able to hit the react
Um,
in the Zoom tools across the bottom of the Zoom interface? There's a heart that says react,
okay,
and if you click on that, then it'll open up
okay.
another dialogue, and you can raise your hand there. Perfect, perfect. And now we're looking for the coach. Jim has opened the floor for the next courageous Toastmaster to have fun while we all learn together today. Does anyone would anyone like to be the coach?
I'm going to throw out the old table topics. It's easy. These are all easy questions. We tell that story all the time, don't we?
Mhm.
It's really not as scary as it sounds. And that's the best part about Toastmasters is having that environment. Oh, I see Kathleen Benson raised her hand.
Hey, Kathleen.
Can you hear us, Kathleen?
There's Kathleen.
There she is. Hi, Kathleen. What club are you a member of? Oh, we can't hear you. Your audio is not working. Still can't. Robert, one thing I've learned to embrace in this whole virtual world is moments of silence. People get uncomfortable. I have
Mhm.
nothing but patience as
Can you
we
hear me
work through
now?
this. We
Yes.
can, yes.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kathleen.
What club are you a member of, Kathleen?
3591 FRB Shymasters. So that's at the Federal Reserve Bank in Chicago.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for making our money.
Yeah.
And then we now need an observer. Now, the observer is just an evaluator. You're just going to take some notes. You're going to observe for fouls. Oh, Carol jumped right in there.
Hey, Carol.
Fantastic. Welcome, Carol. Carol, what club are you a member of?
I am with Maywood Toastmasters, which is 687683.
Fantastic. Thanks for throwing your number in there too. I didn't write it down, but thank you for sharing that. All right, so we have the team. What I will do is I will put 10 minutes up on a timer, and I will, at 9 minutes, I'll throw the yellow card up behind me. Actually, I hope I can. And then actually, Robert, I'm going to ask you to be the timer if you wouldn't mind. Just
Absolutely.
mess up my presenting skills here. And we'll throw 10 minutes up. At 9 minutes, you'll get the yellow card. At 10 minutes, you get the red card. Red card, when you see that, you should stop where you're at. If you need to finish your thought, you may. And what we do is we start with the problem owner. You have as much time as you need to share your problem, maybe a little background. It's up to you. And then the coach's response asks you questions, and then there's a back and forth between that. And the observer is merely watching this whole interaction. And at the end, we will have 3 or 4 minutes of the observer to give their report of what they had for the coach. And then I will go in and throw in my 2.5 cents. Actually, Federal Reserve, I'm going to throw in my dollar when we're done with this. So let's go ahead and start the clock. Debbie
Jim, could you,
Young, the
I'm sorry,
lectern is yours. Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
the timing parameters again.
Yep. So at 9, it's 10 minutes total. At nine
Okay.
minutes, we throw the yellow up. There's no green. There's
Okay.
no minimum. So it's just either a yellow flag, and then at 10 minutes, we will be done with this exercise.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you.
Cool. All right, let's go ahead and on your cue, since you're the timer, Robert.
Let the games begin.
Great. Well, thank you for sitting with me, Miss Coach. The problem that I'm struggling with at my club is that we've had a large influx of new members, and most clubs would think that's wonderful. But I'm having trouble finding existing members who are willing to serve as a coach to these new members. And I kind of see some of the new people floundering a little bit. And as Vice President of Education, I'm doing what I can, but I would love to get your ideas on how I can remedy this problem.
Well, that's a good problem to have, I would say, to start with. Um, is this something, have you talked among your officer group and come up with any ideas about how to handle it?
So we are in an officer transition, and even some of the officers that are currently serving are not willing to serve as a mentor because they're too busy. I have reached out to all the existing members who aren't new. I sent a group email, and then I've reached out to some people individually who I think would especially serve as a good mentor. Some said yes, a lot said no.
Are there things that might entice them to be more responsive to your request?
Like, well, I have given them a checklist of things that they should go through to try and, simplify the process and not make it as intimidating. But, what do you mean by make it enticing?
I was thinking, not to provide a solution, but I was thinking about incentives that, what are they going to get out of it? Um, they might, could be paired up with someone that, has some skills that they want to develop. So, have you thought, to go back to my open ended question, have you thought about um, the things that the coaches will get out of it that may not be so evident to them?
Yeah, that's interesting. So maybe talk to them about how rewarding of an experience it could be. I have tried, reminding them what it was like when they started in Toastmasters and how they relied on other people to help them. So I like that idea of maybe what they're going to take away from it. That's a really good idea. I like that idea, even though you didn't actually give me that idea, right?
This isn't a problem that is alone to Toastmasters. Trying to get people to volunteer when you need them is an issue all over the place. I wasn't absolutely um, gun ho about doing the Observer, but nobody had volunteered at that point, and I decided I would. When you have that situation elsewhere in your work, how are you successful at getting volunteers?
Sometimes I have the power to tell a person they're going to volunteer, but sometimes I will build the person up and say, we could really use you on this committee or this team because you have these skills. And I think, you could showcase your leadership. I have done that at work before.
Showcasing a leadership sounds like a good incentive to me. Um, have you considered any alternate structures to the one-on-one relationship that you started down the path with?
Right. So what I've done so far for the people who, we can't find a mentor for is I've doubled up with some mentors and then they work with like a team of new people as opposed to just having it be the one-on-one relationship. And then also broken up some of those tasks into little group trainings like how to sign up for pathways or how to mark your first icebreaker complete. So we've done little things like that to remedy the lack of mentors.
Are you trying to pair people up solely with those who have a lot of experience, or have you considered other newer members who have gone through it very recently?
That's a really good question, and I have reached out to I'm kind of using a 1 year mark, being a Toastmaster for a year, just because then we feel pretty confident that they've finished level one, that they've filled a lot of different roles in the club multiple times. And that's actually mainly who I've gotten are the newer people. I'm struggling with maybe some of the long-term members. Our club is going to be 50 years old this year, and we actually have several members who've, been in the club 30 plus years. And while they're very reliable for filling their roles, they don't necessarily want to get their hands dirty, I guess you would say, at times.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've tried a lot of unique approaches. How do you discuss this in your meetings?
Well, honestly, during the business portion of our meeting, besides asking people I don't want to make a big deal about it because I don't want the new members to feel like they're left hanging. So we talk about it more in the officer meetings just because, and maybe I'm not being transparent enough, but I just don't want them to feel like they're a burden or that they're not going to get the support they need. And I feel like if I make too big of a deal about it, it's going to draw their attention to it. But maybe that's not a good idea. I don't know.
Yeah, here's a question I probably should have asked up front, but when you say lots of new members, how many are you actually talking about?
8.
Okay.
8 within the last 2.5 months.
Okay. Well, that's great membership growth. So you certainly want to keep those people in the club and make them feel welcome.
Exactly.
Are there any former officers that you can talk this through? Others in your club that you can, that are willing to do it, that you can put your head together on it?
Uh, yeah, yeah. Probably, probably. I kind of feel like it's a little like when we go to find new officers every year. There's some people who will always say yes, but you don't want to overuse those people. It's kind of nice to spread the work around. And I've always liked the phrase, many hands make for light work, because I think it's only fair that everybody, share in the responsibility. And maybe not everybody's mentoring material, but there's always something that you can do to help your club.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, maybe I could reach out to some of the officers and get their feedback on how to get members, or maybe get other people to help me recruit mentors. Um, that that would certainly be a possibility. That would certainly be
Yeah.
a possibility. I think one of the best things you made me think about was telling the member what they can get out of the experience. I like that idea.
Yeah. I had one last question for you, and that was, I'm sure you've been in situations where you're needing to learn new things, and sometimes in a group of people. Maybe it's a new procedure or policy in your work group, that sort of stuff, something that affects multiple people. Were there any particularly effective approaches that you've seen outside of Toastmasters to doing that when there are multiple people?
Um, well, I guess that's kind of why I had put together the checklist. And then I kind of feel, as Vice President of Education, my job is to be a mentor to the mentors, especially if it's their first time sharing. But I guess I could have a little informational webinar maybe to tell people what it's like to be a mentor, give them some instruction. I want to thank you, Miss Coach. You've given me a lot of good things to think about and gave me some ideas to try and bring back to my club.
Okay, well, you're welcome.
Fantastic. Hey, big round of applause for all three of you. Thanks for being vulnerable, open. I will say, and I have ran through this many times, by far the best group that I had for the first time doing that. You guys really deserve a round of applause. You listened, you did it, it's amazing. I've seen many people struggle with it. You didn't. Maybe it's the Toastmaster in you that did that. What we'll do now is 3 to 4 minutes. We'll go ahead and let Miss Carol go ahead and give her observations of the coach. Go ahead, Carol. The lectern is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I thought the coach did an excellent job. I thought she opened with a leading question, and then it was, have you talked to your officers, was kind of the question that was given. I thought that was kind of leading her to that solution, is having your officers kind of figure out what needs to be done. And maybe I'm wrong on that one, but that's what I felt like. And then it was followed up with let's see, make a more enticing or make it more enticing for members to coach or to get involved in coaching. And I thought that was good. And also, I'm using some filler words here because I'm trying to read my notes and make it a rewarding experience, a win-win situation. I thought that was all good. The way that she kind of tried to convince you that that was the way to go. Not she was convincing you, but giving you a little coaching on that. I thought she did a lot of listening. She'd give the question and you had the opportunity to talk because I heard you talk more than she spoke. And so I thought that was a good way to get you to kind of come through and resolve the issue yourself. Then I kind of thought it was a little bit of solutionizing because I also thought that that's an awesome problem to have is too many members. And she gave you the option of using alternate structures. And I thought that was kind of a leading question, leading you to that solution rather than having you kind of develop it on your own. But I did like that she asked you to look for situations outside Toastmasters because so many times when we think about Toastmasters, we think within Toastmasters, but when the situation or the problem itself actually applies to real life. And so looking outside of Toastmasters and kind of looking at other things that are similar and bringing your solutions from outside Toastmasters into Toastmasters. I thought that was really good. And she kind of gave you that twice with two different approaches or two different questions to ask you to look elsewhere for a solution. I thought that was very good. And let's see what else I have. I used an twice. I'd be so dinged if I were in a speech. How have you tried to reach out to others, other coaches or other I think she said maybe it wasn't other coaches, or maybe it was other coaches or other officers, past officers, and you kind of gave the solution that you don't want to use too many people or and I actually like the cliche, many hands make for light work. I like that. But you didn't want to kind of rely on the same people over and over again to solve the problem because you might need them at some point, I'm sure, and you don't want to have to use them for everything. So I thought the coach was very effective because at the end you said you came up with some ideas that you can use to apply to your situation. And I think that's the solution you want to end up with is a solution period to your problem. And if her questions drove you there, then I would say she did an excellent job at coaching you. And that's all I have. Thanks.
All right, big round of applause for Carol. Thank you so much for sharing. You had some very, very astute observations. And let's kind of like soak this in for just a minute. I want everybody to kind of see what happened here. First off, on the problem side, I think that was a great problem. And the problem you're sharing, I have a club in our district as well, too. They even posed this question, is it possible for us to limit membership? I know, ouch, right? As a district director, you're like, no. So they're even talking about, can we get some assistance from the district in starting a club that's within 3 or 4 miles from the one that's currently meeting? And so they're talking about like expanding out that way because she is and has been a former district governor, if you know what that means. It's been a few years ago. And she is mentoring a group of really young people kind of on her own and they ran into that same problem is everything that you just said. So other clubs, good clubs, clubs with great club quality, and sometimes things just happen, and then people show up. That is truly a real problem with some of our clubs, and it's the opposite of what other ones that we are struggling. And we can talk about how we can work through some of that as well. But there's a couple of things I wanted to point out just in my part of the feedback for this. Oops, wait a minute. What happened to that? Oh, there we go. Um, a couple of things. You had several yes or no questions that were answered. Now, the group I work with, they're brutal. They're like, but I have always defended that it is okay to ask yes or no questions. Sometimes those lead to the other questions. So it is okay. But in this practice, we want to not ask them. I think one of them was, are there things? So that was a blah blah blah, and it was that could have been yes, yes there are things.
Yeah.
So, but you answered it because there's a level of trust that's already been developed between the group here. So those don't become issues. So you had several of those. There were a couple leading questions. You got it right, Carol. There were some that said, have you thought about? Have you considered? Anytime you utilize those words, you're leading them in the direction that you would like them to go to. So I would ask you to consider using different words and wording it differently that way. And then the one thing and so Kathleen, you asked 10 questions in 9 minutes. So great job on the questions. You didn't hesitate once. And I've been, like I said, this is the best I've ever seen anybody respond in the first time doing it, where we just kind of you can't think of them. You did a great job on having questions to ask. But one of the most important things that I want to point out is, and this is what Deb said, and it was Deborah. Remember, actually, I reworded it for you. Remember what it's like to be new. And I think we don't do that enough as leaders in our clubs, as district leaders, to realize that when people walk into our club for the first time, they are brand new. We have so many acronyms, we have so many ways of doing that, we have so many rules. You got to do it this way and you got to do that. And realize, and then we want to throw them up there, right? All our guests, let's throw them right up there and do table topics right now. And realize that there was a point maybe in your life, I know for me, it was in fifth grade, deathly afraid of even raising my hand in school. And these are the same visitors that we're going to have. So I think that's important to know. If you have 8 visitors, the reason they're there is they were brave enough to show up. So we also have to remember what it's like to be new. And I think that's the interpretation I got from what you had there. So looking at this whole process, the problem owner defines the problem, finds the solution themselves. Like I even heard Deborah say that. It's like, oh, you didn't really say that, but I just thought of it. That's the gold of this method. And you have to be somewhat transparent and vulnerable. The coach, you're practicing those valuable skills of asking questions uh, and really being interested. Those are very, very important things, is to have that curiosity. You have to be able to truly, truly be curious. And then the observer, as I'm observing the observer watching the coach, these are all things that when you develop these skills, you can see them to better yourself. And you really gave some great feedback. I don't know that there was a whole lot of missed opportunities or opportunities to go deeper, but there's always that, remember that in the earlier in the slide, it's that, can you tell me more about that? That one's always a golden one to get a little bit deeper in some of it, because I think there were opportunities that I saw. Love to talk to you about, Deborah. Is it sounds like, and I've had a little bit of this discussion with Robert earlier. Is your how much leadership within your own club are actively involved, and how do you get them involved, and are they burned out? They're burned out, and you've got 8 like starry-eyed fresh people who want to go for it, and you have to balance those things out and to find that one person. I think that was the one question that I would have changed, and I think I would like you to ask this as well too, is I believe, are there I think you asked any other officers to work with. How about this? How about wording it this way? Who could you ask? And this goes to that point of action. And I'll ask you that, Deborah, is who can you ask to help you? You're not here alone. Find one person. Even if it's one person, 2 people can make that happen. So I would encourage you to reach out and find that person. So that is the program. This is the exercise. This is the idea of leadership via transparency. And here's the thing that I told you that I was going to wrap that up with. Anybody here heard of Kinlan's Law? Go ahead and throw your hands up if you've ever heard of it. It was new to me. It's very similar to Murphy's Law. It's like there's a list of laws of just things that if you do it, these results happen. So that's that set of rules. Well, Kinlan's Law is exactly this. If you write the problem down clearly, then the matter's half solved. And I would challenge everybody when we're in these situations with our clubs, is these problems that we're asking about, they're not clearly defined. It's like, we have, there's something about our club culture. Well, what is the something? So you have to ask those questions in lean construction. Again, I gotta go back to the fact that I'm a superintendent, but in lean construction, there's a thing called five whys. People utilize it in other aspects of problem solving, but it's to ask why. And then all you do is ask why again. And as you dive deeper into that problem, that's ultimately what you're doing through asking questions versus saying it would have been pretty easy for us to say, buck up, Deborah. Like, we don't have enough people in our club to even, we need a coach. It'd be easy to say things like that, but it's not. We have to understand the situation. And at least how I interpret it is, you need some more support on the leadership side. How do we encourage them? How do we get them involved? And really take a problem that is a great problem to have, but it's still a problem. As I mentioned, we've got a club in our district who's saying, "Hey, can we limit how many people come in?" So that's another problem to solve, right? So Kinlan's law is something I would challenge you to utilize if you walk away with anything. This is really what this is about: is become problem solving. I've applied this specifically to a problem when I had an issue, and this a sidebar story, but I have a 3.5 hour drive to this one job site, and I had an issue, and I couldn't fully define it. I couldn't understand it. Once I fully defined it, I was able to solve it, and so it's a problem solving process. A little embarrassing. It took me 3 hours of that drive to figure this out, but it's all about the process. And then, kind of moving on, we definitely got some time for some questions and answers. I'll leave that open. I think I've only got a couple of minutes left. I will say this, Robert, it's up to you and how much time you want to give on the question side. I will throw this out there. Who has a cell phone sitting by them? Anybody? Nobody has cell phones, right? No problems, no cell phones. I know everybody has one. Go ahead and click that QR code. Like any Toastmaster, I value incredibly your feedback. So hit that QR code, give me some feedback on this training. There's always things that I need to improve on. I would love to connect with you. What has helped me greatly are the three books that you see in front of you. The Coaching Habit is a great standard way of asking questions. I don't apply that. I know people that utilize it as specifically as a format. I don't. The Leading with Questions is what kind of got me down this journey. And the Power Questions have just read recently within the last month. And that was a pretty eye-opening book. And I've got some stories I could share with that where it went deeper than I thought just by asking the question, what's the toughest question you've ever been asked? That's one of the questions that are within the power questions. If you'd like to connect with me, LinkedIn is the best way. I'm on Facebook because I'm a Toastmaster, but other than that, I'm typically on LinkedIn. So you can reach out, connect with me, James Gable. I do have a podcast, which I have put in on the shelf for a little bit, but I do have a website as well, theuncommoncommunicator.com, where I do have episodes of my podcast as well, too. But please, I know how many are in the room. I know how we are all Toastmasters craving feedback, and I know that everybody might have a cell phone near you. So please reach out, click that QR code, and provide some feedback. It's been my pleasure being with District 103 and meeting with your leaders at District Leader Training. They are passionate about you. They're passionate about your district. They're passionate about your clubs. And you've got a great set of leaders, and it's been my pleasure to present to you this. Back to you, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you so much, James. Now, we do have time for questions and answers. So please take as much as you have. We're grateful and respectful of your time today. So please, if there's anyone that has questions, uh, raise your hand and unmute yourself and fire away.
I have a quick question. I was just wondering around this problem if Toastmaster is open to pulling coaches from other clubs. When you're in a situation where you can't find a coach within your club, can you ask for a coach outside your club? And then two, is it a is Toastmasters open to doing recordings that are like foundational for new members and just kind of sharing the same topics with all of the new members so that they have some tools that they can use and they're all getting a consistent message?
Well, and I think that's a great question. and probably a great path, something to think about. And that would probably be in the hands of the district. I don't see international necessarily doing that. I always direct people to the international website because there's a wealth of information. I've spent hours on it. You can't find the bottom of it. There's a ton of information. But in regards to a coach, the coach should be somebody outside of the club, anyways. We're struggling with assigning coaches. Our district has 60 clubs that are eligible for coach. Oddly enough, we were acknowledged during the district leader training that we're in the top three of the region of clubs that are 20 plus. And at the same time, I have 60 clubs that need coaches. So there's always that dichotomy of leadership in there. And some clubs don't want it. But one thing that we have, and I've challenged the team, our club growth director, along with our club retention chair, is to look at group coaching. So we've tried a couple of those on our website. Didn't have a whole lot of activity, so I've asked them to be a little more pointed in inviting clubs that are in need of or want a coach to come to a group coaching. So you're not necessarily doing the coach's credit for your
Mhm.
DTM, but it's providing that support for our clubs, and that's one thing that we've offered. Haven't quite got off the ground because it goes back to people want to, but that's, I think, the only way that we're going to be able to go past the we don't have enough people to fill the coaches. Let's have coaching sessions for multiple clubs who say, you know what, we want some help. And first get them to admit there. Isn't that the first line of admitting? Isn't that what is that? The 12 steps? Like, you have to admit it. You have a problem. And we all know, like, there's some clubs that are happy with 8 members. They're happy with 10
Right.
and 12. And, I don't know if a lot of this has been shared yet with every member. It hasn't been officially shared, but the new 8 is 12 moving into next year. So when you're 8 was the you're on the bubble, and 12 you're eligible for coach. 12 is the new year on the bubble. Like, if you have 11, then you're looking at possible suspension. Why? That seems harsh, but the international says you need more members to have a healthy club. And so that is something that's coming down the pipe or the
Right.
pike. I've had debate on that one. I'm not sure which one you abide by. Do you guys have pikes or pipes? I'm not sure. But either way, it's coming. It's coming our way. So a group coaching thing, I think, would be a great way to help accommodate that kind of lack of coaches. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just hope I can jump in. Hi, I'm Ingrid. I was the president, or am the president currently at MJM Speakers Circle in Chicago, Club 6799. And thank you, James, for mentioning group coaching, because that's something that I was going to recommend as a solution. And another question that I have is, are we restricted to how we have some of those conversations? I think about the earlier example, because it's work-based, there may be other issues that members think that this is being something that's pushed on me, and it becomes, like outside of my, people may think, oh, that's outside of my job description. So I was just wondering, is there an opportunity to have like a lunch chat, a coffee chat, and just change the name from mentoring to those terms so it's not, doesn't sound as formal? Just a suggestion. And I was also wondering if, it's not a question again, I'm wondering, or a process that I thought you might want to consider as the coach. Whenever you are asking someone a question, can you go back and say, what did you think about that? Even if you offer a solution, you want to get feedback about what your coach E is thinking about that. How does that sound? Does that make sense? So I always ask questions along that way. Anyway, because in my role, I am a career counselor. So there's always that question and feedback just to get at the person to come to a solution for themselves. Just my 2 cents, 2.5 cents.
No, you get $1 for that one. That's some great advice. $1 too. How's that sound? No, I appreciate that. And you make a great point, which is about connection. You have to make that connection, and to make that connection is that back and forth that goes on in the practice of us really supporting other people in their roles. So that's some great advice. Thanks so much, Ingrid. Appreciate that. Go ahead, Debbie. I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I had a question in talking about club coaching. I wanted to serve as a club coach because I'm working towards my DTM, and our district had several clubs in need. And I did finally get matched with one, but some of the clubs that the district had reached out trying to, peddle me as a coach didn't want to coach. And I think they were going to the executive team of a club. Is that normally what you do when you try to get a coach, or does the whole club membership vote if they want a club coach? How does that process work?
It definitely goes to the whole or to the leadership. That's who we reach out to because there is a requirement in to receive a club coach, which is they've upgraded this past year where you have to go through a training module as well as the coach to be able to match up. And when you assign a coach, it's been a couple of years, then TLIs or TIs checking to make sure that happened. And I was even told by a member that, oh yeah, I took the training, so I went and assigned it because I really had no way of verifying it. And they're like, nope, they have not taken that training. The club hasn't. So there's that matching which happens at the executive level of the club. So there is that. There is certainly a level, I believe, where the clubs could vote on it if they wanted. But what you identified is really the biggest issue we as district leaders have is one is do people even know what the district does? Like, there are clubs that could care less what the district does. We're looking at adding portions of District 23 as part of this realignment that's going on, and they're even convinced that there's clubs that are going to be added to District 26 that won't even ever know because they're just do their own thing. And the other thing is really understanding what the district does and how we can help support to what you were saying, which is feeling like it's forced on them. And that's never the intention. Like that, if you go back to the district mission, which is we build new clubs and we support all clubs in achieving excellence, that supporting of the clubs, and then it goes down to the club mission, where that's why I want to support that this year in our district in the second half is really understanding you. And I would challenge every leader here. You guys are all district or you're all club officer leaders here for some training. Look at the club mission, embrace it. Because in reality, if your decisions are made off of that, then you are serving the purpose of the club. You're serving your members. You're serving and developing leadership. You are serving yourself by finding opportunities for growth. And then you're providing that positive and supportive influence. So I think really does go back to as simple as are you utilizing the club mission in your club program?
Thank you.
Fantastic. Are there any more questions for the very generous James Gable? I had a brief question earlier that I'll just throw out, but it's not directly attached to the wonderful exercise and leadership model that you've shared with us today. But it's about leader fatigue, as it were, this Toastmasters phenomenon where the same leaders are volunteering again and again and again and burning themselves out. What has your experience been, and how are you helping to lead your district through that mire?
I told you earlier, Robert, you had to submit all questions 24 hours in advance, especially if they're that deep of a question, because everybody in this room has now has had or knows somebody who is going through that level of fatigue, and that is certainly something that I saw on the district level leadership when I was club growth director. We didn't have a full complement of area directors, even division directors. Last the year, I think the year in my club in my program quality year we were missing one division director, so somebody shared that role, and we've been pretty fortunate this year to have the full complement of division directors. We're only short a couple of area directors, and so that fatigue is top of mind. So that is just a brilliant question for any district to ask that. And when we've kind of dissolved it down, there's a couple of things I think that would be helpful in finding that leadership. First thing is, how excited are you? How excited are you as your club leaders to be the club leaders? And we talk about that fatigue, and that's where I think truly looking at the club mission, which is we provide a positive and supportive atmosphere. Do we? That's just it's a good check. The moments of truth is a good check on the program, but if we consolidate it down even deeper to the club mission, is really understanding the next step of that is really about developing ourselves, our leadership and our communication skills. That's the next step of the club mission and developing those things. Where are we at in that journey? I've got a whole nother message that I talk about in regards to um, about having connecting your dots, really, why are you here? What's your why? Understanding your why. And there's three kinds of leaders that we have the lifelong learners. These are the people, or I'm sorry, we have the lifetime members. Them. That's Toastmasters is their thing, and the best speech that they ever are going to give, or the one that they're going to give in the club, and that's all they want. They're to support the club. They're at every training. They're at everything. And then there's the learners. They come in for just a brief moment, sometimes 6 months to a year, and kind of feel like they get what they wanted out of it, which we all know you can never fully accomplish that through this program. And then the last one are the leaders, people that commit to leading. And my goal this year in the district was to connect those dots, to connect the lifelong people with becoming leaders, because they're not all leaders, and then really finding the learners and connecting them either way on outside of that bubble to either be a lifelong learner or to become a leader into that leadership pathway. But looking at it came down to, especially the lifelong Toastmasters, because they're the lifeblood of this organization. They're the ones who pay the dues to multiple clubs, right? That's what kind of feeds the mission, is really going back to why. And that goes back to that club mission. So I really think it comes down to communicating that. And we've been pretty successful at generating new leaders this year in our district by leadership. And I guarantee you, I have at least a handful of area directors who joined because they knew that there was leadership via transparency, because there was opportunities to get support. And then the other thing is, and this goes down at the club level, is being able to support people. How many times do we push somebody, into the role? Hey, welcome to VPE. It's only an hour a week that you'll have to spend, or whatever that story is that we tell. I don't want to use the word lie, but we're not there to support them. So it's about offering support. So that's, I think, communicating support, and then also communicating what their why is and helping them connect to that dot. Once people see that, then it becomes a bigger picture than just that brief moment. I hope now I've been able to answer that twice privately before. I hope I've answered that question for you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, James. Everyone, a round of applause for District 26 Director James Gable and his wonderful presentation. We've shared his links in the chat, so there is the link to connect with James on LinkedIn, the link for the feedback. If you don't have the camera on your mobile device that pulls up the QR code, I shared the link there. We've also got James' website, theUncommonCommunicator.com, and his podcast link is also on there. So uh, thank you so much again, James. And now we're going to take a 5-minute break, if that's okay for everyone. Bio break, stretch your legs, get some coffee, and I'm going to open up the breakout rooms, and we'll begin to populate the breakout rooms. And the trainings should begin in about 5 minutes, if that's all right with everybody. Okay, 5 minutes commencing now. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Robert. Oops, and you probably got to take a quick break too, but I'm
Put it
going to
on me.
take off as well too. We've got a couple of speech contests going on today.
Absolutely.
And so I'm going to take off and go on to the next thing. But thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I am going to offer this. I see Valerie on. Sandra, I'm sure, is on as well too. But I'll offer this. I'd be glad to facilitate. If somebody wanted to have a leadership via transparency exercise for an hour, I will donate that to your district. If you're willing to do that, I can facilitate another one of these for whatever leaders that we have. I've kept mine only to my district leaders because my focus is theirs as district director, but I'll open up to anybody in your district if you wanted to put it together. I'd be glad to facilitate that for you if our or when our schedules align. I don't want to say if they will. So
Yeah.
that's my gift to
Yes.
District 103, and thanks so much for having me.
James, hi, this is Sandra. I'm in the car. So I just wanted to say thank you so much. That was an awesome presentation. And I just want to let everyone know that James and I connected 2 weeks ago at our mid-year training. And so I think this stresses or highlights the importance of networking, because just in chatting with James and working together on our mid-year training exercises that they gave us as district directors, it allowed me to see that he had a wonderful presentation. And I just trusted that it was something that we needed to hear. And I think he did deliver a great message. And there was a great exercise for some of our members to participate in. So again, James, thank you for giving us your time this morning.
Yeah, thanks you. Thank you so much, Sandra. Thank you, District 103. You guys are on a good path. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks. Safe travels out there. All right.